Thank you very much. It's great to see so many people here, and it's going to be a great pleasure for me to have a fireside chat with Oz Usman, who's the leader in the cell and gene therapy for Novartis. Oz actually was telling me earlier on that he disappointed his mother when he was about to become a consultant in the northwest of England and decided to move into industry, but I bet she's not disappointed now. So Oz and I share a bit of a heritage from the northwest, which maybe you'll detect in that residual accent, but if we come up now, we'll have this chat. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So, no real fireside, no poker, no whiskey. We got this stage. And I'd like to thank Kieran as well for talking so warmly about the things that we're trying to do at the Catapult. I don't want to really make this into a Catapult event. I think it's all about the industry and what's happening. So for me, having been in biotech all my career, and spending a little stint actually running a transfusion service, cells to treat patients aren't new. The oldest cell therapy is blood transfusion, followed on by bone marrow transplant, and that's a real mainstay of clinical practice. But the idea of a cell as a medicine rather than as a practice of medicine or treatment is new. And we hear on the TV or radio every morning, so Professor X, you've grown a new ear on a mouse, or this or that or the other. When is it going to be available for patients? And it's always in 5 years, and there's lots of things to do. And this industry holds such promise: immune therapies, gene therapies, tissue engineering, a whole range of cell therapies and immune therapies. But it's been characterized as difficult to transact in business because it's a different model to what big pharma's used to. Clearly, all sorts of technical issues about manufacturing and supply, and also just getting these things through the regulators so that they can be delivered safely. And that's been the characterization of why big pharma maybe wasn't interested, or they're only in toe deep. Novartis is more than toe deep, and if you look at the story so far of Novartis's involvement in this, and I did my homework yesterday, and I found new stuff out on the website that I haven't looked at. 2011, UPenn announces some early interesting results. 2011, okay? 2012, there's a collaboration announced. UPenn and Novartis. 2013, 1 year later, fantastic results. 80% in remission of patients in remission, absolutely fantastic. 2014, early 2014, FDA breakthrough designation. And the thing that really shocked me when I did my homework yesterday was that on Novartis' website, CTL019 is going to be predicted to be filing for ALL in 2016, with a follow-on in 2017. So that's 5 years from kind of the initial clinical signals to a filing. That's unprecedented. So Oz, I mean, Novartis jumping into this and planning such progress is just fantastic. Tell us the background to how, why, and the ambition you have for Novartis in this space, and the ambition for the treatments.
So thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. So it is an amazing story if you look at the speed with which the advancements have occurred in the field, and I think Kieran did a fantastic job this morning, so thank you for making my life easier by showing the precedent history of the legacy models that we have from the life sciences industry and where we want to get to. And it's very much in that spirit, I think, we're kicking off this morning. So yeah, the story in terms of the timelines you've already highlighted, but maybe if I could just for a second give folks a perspective on the therapy itself. You mentioned CTL019, that's one of our portfolio offerings. It's our most mature and probably the major reason why Novartis decided earlier this year to create a dedicated business around cell and gene therapy. So as part of the pharma organization, we have our general medicines business, we have our oncology business, and now we're establishing a therapeutic unit as a standalone entity, leveraging the best of Novartis, but focusing on cell and gene therapies. And I'm very privileged to be leading that organization. So in layman's terms, you're looking at a platform, and you saw pictures of Emily Whitehead. She's actually coming up to 3 years complete remission now. And I'd encourage you all to have a look at sort of the YouTube videos on Emily. There's a fantastic one recently done through Stand Up to Cancer, which was a telethon done in the US, where her and her family speak about the experience. I'd strongly encourage you to have a look at that, because it brings it home to life, and especially as a parent, you kind of feel a very close affinity to the situation. The therapy itself is basically taking an individual with cancer, such as acute lymphoblastic leukemia. That's a good target to look at. We apheresis the patient, meaning that we take their blood and we filter their blood to capture an appropriate section of the blood, the white cells in effect. We take those blood cells, we in effect then harvest out the T cells, which are the key cells in the immune system, which have the ability to actually act as killer cells, and they are very critical to immune function. We then engineer in those cells an expression of a molecule called the CART molecule. It's a protein, but it's a very, very unique protein in that it targets very, very specifically something called CD19. CD19 is expressed on B cells. It's a very specific biomarker for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And most, not all, but significant number of patients with ALL are positive for that marker. These T cells are then grown up, harvested and grown. They're then reintroduced back into the patient. And in effect, when they're reintroduced back to the patient, those cells multiply and they become hunter cells. They, in effect, hunt down the cancer and destroy it. And that really sounds very science fiction-esque, but that you saw the pictures of the reality of where we are now. And so when Novartis initially saw the data, and I have to credit my oncology colleagues in the organization who first became very acutely interested with the science, and Professor Carl June's organization at the University of Pennsylvania, we really started to focus on this as a platform from a scientific perspective. It complemented our internal organization's thinking and where the technology could be moving to. And it was absolutely the right time to do a change in the model. And the model, as Kieran was describing, is exactly the kind of approach Novartis is taking. Bringing a cell therapy to market is not going to be an easy thing, and it's something that no one company can do alone. So it is going to be a symbiotic relationship. It's going to involve partnerships with academics, with players like GE, with many colleagues that are in the room who have been in this industry a long time. So we're at the cusp of making personalized medicine a reality, and that's something the industry has spoken about for a long time. But we firmly believe that there are certain soft trends and there are hard trends in this industry. There is a hard trend. Cell and gene therapies are going to become a pillar of the practice of medicine. And it's a question of who has the courage to invest in that, to really see where this space can move. And Novartis, one of the beauties of Novartis is that we're a scientifically agnostic organization. So good science, it sells. That's our firm belief. So it's a platform and a space that we've been in for some time. But the catalyst of CART19, the amazing results, it required us to think and work in a different way. And that was the incentive for investing now. Well, we started investing 3-4 years ago, very heavily. And we've certainly made a big public commitment that this is going to be a future potential business for us. And
so it was dramatic clinical results that gave you the confidence to say, we know it's difficult, but the results are so big, we're going to have a go.
Yeah, and also the fact that it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. I mean, this is an industry that for the past 20 years in the regenerative medicine space has been experimenting very well. But the reality to transitioning translational medicine findings to clinical reality, it was too compelling for us to stand by and ignore it.
So with the 2016 filing coming up, you're going to be using the technology that you've got more or less now. More or less. Do you think it's mature enough to get you there for this first lot and actually to be robust enough and safe enough? Because Because those are many of the issues that we have
Sure.
to face, and many of the questions that we have to face, and those are the things the regulators ask, and clinicians, apart from the ones who are really immersed in it, they ask those questions. So tell us about how you think you're going to build the confidence to deliver around the technology to actually turn this from a hand-cranked medicine into a global medicine.
Yeah, so a big part of the investments a company like Novartis is making and has made and will continue to is specifically around the area that you've talked about, which is the scalability, reproducibility, critical quality systems that need to be in place to satisfy not just regulators' needs, but our needs as well. I mean, Kieran highlighted it as well in the presentation. This is going to be the potential Achilles heel for this industry. So we're pretty confident right now that in terms of the process that was, if I can say, the benchtop process from the University of Pennsylvania for creating something like the CART therapies, we're at a point now where we've scaled that up and we've locked a process that we are in discussions with regulators with, that we think this is a great first step. But I think it's something that the audience should appreciate, that this is an area in which process development, process improvement, it's kind of a natural way of doing business for us. So in the traditional drug development biologic space, what you see is very sequential thinking. So you have a target, you develop, you get a clinic, you get to market, and then if you have a couple of really smart guys and girls in the room, they think about life cycle management early on. Here, there is no choice. So we're thinking about this now in terms of, yes, we have a process that we're going to go out to market with, but the reality is very fast following that, we will have other process improvements within that system, which we then are going to have to bridge with clinical and scientific data. But the regulators are receptive to this thinking because they see that a new way of thinking here. They are going to also have to be bold and courageous in some of the parameters that are set because, frankly, in a lot of space here, there's a white space here in terms of setting standards.
So I was in monoclonals in 1979, believe it or not. It's hard to believe, eh? So I saw the evolution of that, and when I first started in this space, people were saying, oh, the regulators won't have it because they don't recognize it, blah, 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 blah. But we've just had in the UK an announcement of the one-stop shop for regulation. My sense is they're not trying to back it into old systems. They're adapting. Yeah. So, your main experiences with FDA, tell us about FDA, how FDA are sort of responding.
We have incredibly, we've received very, very positive and strong feedback from global agencies. So it's interesting. Some of my team members just returned meeting health authorities around the world as part of describing and educating to them the platform, cell and gene therapies in general. And the appetite and the hunger for health authorities actually queuing up to want to be the first to review and get these products to market is absolutely amazing. It's blown us away. And it's fascinating when you look at it just outside of the FDA. I mean, the European Union now with advanced cellular therapy initiatives, very mature in their thinking, but really wanting to partner. And also, if you look at parts of the world like Japan, I mean, they have a very, very good appetite for developing these platforms and products and accelerating them because they really see the value in terms of how it's going to impact healthcare systems longer term. And I think Kieran touched on Japan in particular. But there is strong, strong appetite and very open and transparent dialogue. And also a realization by regulators that they don't want to box us in with the precedent biologic reference standards. They actually want to partner with us. And that they're not going to give anybody a break, let's be real. I mean, they're regulators at the end of the day. But in terms of their ability to think creatively with us and co-create, that's been very refreshing for me coming into this business sector. Okay, great. Now, Kieran talked about the kind of linearity of the processes earlier on. And, some big pharma still thinks like that. I've met some of the firms who are barely going into biologicals, dinosaur pharma there. I'll get shot for that one, I think, but there you go. And you've got biologicals, which is kind of similar with a different manufacturing process and blah, blah, blah.
But they all make a product and they ship it to pharmacy, right? And then there's a process that moves on from that. Here, in this, particularly for an autologous, you've got a merging of the boundaries between healthcare delivery with the patient getting their cells off to the factory and then back for delivery. And I see kind of merging of those boundaries to actually deliver. But of course, everybody's interested in that and everybody wants to get paid. So how do you think that's going to work out?
Yeah, so the way we're thinking about it, and it's probably the way I think a lot of folks who are experts in this area are really thinking about it as well. So, this isn't about a product, it's not about a brand, right? It's not even a platform. So the way we think of it, it's a service.
Yeah.
And so big pharma, life sciences in general, we're not service-based companies, okay? But we have to evolve and develop the mechanisms to become service-like, which is why it's going to require partners and interdependencies with others. And that's the exciting bit about this space, but it's also a challenge, right? You said dinosaur.
Because you're going to bear the costs, the huge costs of filing, of licensing. The health systems aren't going to bear that. You're going to bear
Sure.
that.
I mean,
so
we're going to make the investments to get
paid.
that system of healthcare interface set up right. But the way we view it is it's going to be a service provision. I mean, to take sort of blue sky thinking here, you're going to be taking a patient's, if it's an autologous platform, so something taken from an individual patient, it gets shipped to a processing facility and then shipped back. You've got to think of supply chain, you've got to think of logistics, but you've got to think about the service level at the point of care.
Yeah.
So a patient coming in, a child with cancer, 5 years of age, with parents, you got to think of that ecosystem. How do you make this as painless a process possible for what is already a tragic situation? So you have to think about how you plug and play a system in place that allows reimbursement. You have data real-time generated, etc. You then think about the quality checks and how you get something back from the point of service back through a system and engineered back. And that really requires a very different and creative and innovative mindset. And so we are well into our thinking around what we think we can do. We're also, I think, very we realize we're humble that we need partners in this space.
Sure.
This isn't going to be solved by one
Sure.
player. So I hope that gives you some perspectives on how we're approaching it.
Okay, so we kind of talked a lot about the initial products and your thinking around those. You're into other areas, other cell and gene therapies, stem cell-based, pluripotent, auto, allo, in vivo gene therapy. Give me a sense of what you're thinking of where those other therapies are going to land. Not necessarily with Novartis, but just how this whole sectors and which is the next hot field. Because you're in the hottest field right now.
Yeah.
What's next to be hot?
So I think potentially they all have the potential to be extremely hot. I think you're right that CAR therapies right now, it is probably the most hottest platform in the cell and gene space. But other areas that I would keep a close eye on, clearly the human stem cell business itself, it's radically changing. Looking at better ways to harvest and culture cells, but get honing mechanisms for cells.
Right.
To treat not just hematological malignancies, because traditionally human stem cells, a lot of people were thinking about, bone marrow transplantation, hematological conditions, but then you start thinking about hemoglobinopathies, sickle cell disease, thalassemias, other conditions, inborn errors of metabolism, which are hugely draining and burdensome to the healthcare systems around the world. These are areas that I would pay a lot of attention to. I'd also be looking at the transplant space. I think there's some very, very cool stuff. We're involved in that space, others are, with facilitator cell type technologies where you can obviate the need for immunosuppression and create chimeric combined immune systems. So patients receive a kidney, they don't reject the kidney and they don't need immunosuppressions in theory. I mean, that's pretty transformative for transplant. If you look at the aging population demographics, you're going to get transplants. Transplant kidney lasts, 10 years before you start to see deterioration again. So that's another space. I would think the visual space is something folks should keep an eye on. There's a lot of really cool science, to keep an eye on. Corneal transplants, others where there is a demand and supply issue where, frankly, the supply does not meet the demand. That's another area.
And I know we have one or two companies actually bang on in that space in the room today, so it'd be great to hear what they say.
So I think apart from the science, it's all the enabling platforms that allow those things to happen. So I think from looking at the crystal ball here, I think all of these spaces are going to be fantastic, but probably those ones that I've highlighted, the ones that I'm acutely interested in. But I would say that I'd encourage folks to look around the adjacent spaces as well.
Right. And to a certain extent, you've got the kind of the IP and the therapies, but I think in the future there'll be, to Kieran's point, there'll be IP in the box that it happens in.
And we have to think about IP differently. It's not like traditional pharma IP anymore, or biologic IP, right? The IP will be embedded in the systems, in data, in informatics. It's going to be a very different way of value creation.
So I'm now going to move on to kind of what your sense of the industry is, and if the paradigm shift that seems to be there, and the relevance for investors. So again, we heard the kind of linear thinking. There's the big central drug discovery. There's been the outsourcing of discovery to biotech. And now, of course, you've reached straight into university. Do you think there's a paradigm shift there about the way that investors should think about where the opportunities are? And I'm thinking investors, everyone from VCs, public funds, big companies, corporate funds, charities even, about how that's going to work. Do you think that is fundamentally changing that kind of landscape about that outsource?
Yeah, I think it has fundamentally changed and will fundamentally change moving forward. I think Kieran's slide that he showed was a fantastic slide in terms of how the partnerships of academics, biotechs, the investor community, large organizations like a GE, like a Novartis, it's happened and it's happening. I think you'll see more of it. I would say, I'd caution, it takes courage to do something like that. I mean, these are not easy deals to orchestrate, but there's a realization that the industries have to move forward in a symbiotic way, and it's going to be a lot more collaborative and a lot more partnership focused. So I see potentially a lot of creative deal making happening in this space moving forward. So yeah, to answer your question, the paradigm has shifted, and I think you're going to see more of the type of collaborations that Novartis and University of Pennsylvania have done.
Right. So are you basically saying that, I mean, some VC places have been shy of getting in early. If they want to be there, they've probably got to get in early.
Well, it's a hot space now. I mean, it's an incredibly hot space. So, I mean, this is, I think this has been a real eye-opener for the investor community, particularly the VC world. They're acutely interested in looking at this space now in a very different way. And I think, people are seeing the potential here for acceleration. I mean, incubators. Translating, I mean, to take something from a phase 1 benchtop setting, right? Yeah. So pre-POC, phase 1, to potentially commercialization in less than 5 to 6 years. I mean,
it's unprecedented.
When we've grown up in an industry where, I still remember it's a 15-year cycle, right? Yeah. I'm still looking at things that, that I looked at back in '98 that we're still trying to bring to market. So it is a paradigm shift, and it's a case of having the courage to think about these platforms now and invest. But I think at the end of the day, the data will speak for itself, right? And we're at the point now where there's enough maturity of clinical data to make those investment choices.
Okay, that's great. I'm getting the big flashing shut up, Keith and Oz from down there.
We get the message.
So we'll draw this to a close. I want to thank you for talking to us, and we really wish the program well.
Thank you.
You doing well will mean that the whole industry will do well.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, and I guess we'll take some questions now. Or?
Yeah, maybe one or two questions.
Sure.
We have a mic here.
So any questions for us? Right at the back.
Thanks. Hi, I'm from the Financial Times newspaper. We've obviously seen tremendous potential for CAR therapy in blood cancer. I was wondering if you can talk about its potential to be expanded into solid tumours. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, it's absolutely makes sense to explore other types of the cancers. So yes, we are collaborating with Penn colleagues to look at other tumour types. Solid tumours for sure is a target for us. I can't comment on any data yet. It's early days, but it's absolutely a focus, and it makes sense. And I think there's also a lot of thinking that's matured now outside of cancer as well, looking at autoimmune diseases and other conditions, immunological conditions. So I think in the next 2 years, you will start to see a lot more data in other types of cancers, solid tumors and others. And in the next couple of months, I think with the upcoming scientific events, particularly the American Society of Hematology and ASCO next year, you'll start to see much more data around how those platforms are maturing. But it's very exciting, extremely promising.
So one more over here. Oh, right.
There's a lady there.
Another one here as well. Okay, sure. Sorry.
I'm Lisa Melton from Nature Biotechnology. CD19 is a pretty spectacular target, but how are you dealing with the cytokine release syndrome, and how do the regulators view this issue?
So thank you for the question. So the question pointed out is around a side effect called cytokine release syndrome, which is part of the challenges with a lot of immunological therapies, but particularly CAR therapies. You actually want to see, and basically what it is it's when you have the tumor being attacked, there's a massive release of toxic items, particularly interleukins, etc., and this causes a massive response. And in certain instances, it can be fatal. There are ways to manage this. So there are interleukin antagonists like tocilizumab. There are protocols in place where you can manage these kind of events. So I think you'll see very good protocols to try and manage this. Regulators fully see the challenges from a benefit and risk perspective. When you look at these platforms, the data in terms of complete remissions, etc., the benefit risk is still very, very compelling. So I believe it's a manageable situation. It's something that we and others will look at more closely from a scientific perspective to understand better mechanistically how you can improve it. And I think there are very smart ways to deal with it. For example, there are future plans that many are looking at in terms of switchable CARTs and CARTs where you can shut the CART therapy down. So there's a lot of regulatable CARTs, as they're called. And that thinking is maturing as well. So it's work in progress, but I think it's a definite risk, and it's something that I think can be managed.
Okay, great. Well, I know we've got to move on, and I'm sure there's one or two people waiting.
Yeah, we can take those questions.
We'll take them afterwards if that's okay. Sorry
Sure.
to do that. So once again, thank you very much. I think we better skedaddle, and I think next on we have Jean-Christophe Renondin from Brian Garnier, who's going to be chairing the next panel.